In this video, we are going to cover our lab M03L01. This is essentially going to be the exercise 7.1, where we're getting input and displaying the output. This is pretty easy this week. We don't have a lot of complex processing that we're doing. We're just trying to deal with some of our new input controls and how we can retrieve the data and then write it out to the screen. So this is essentially what we're doing for exercise 7.1, 7.2, and then for your assignment. For this particular exercise, I've already cloned the repo. You can go ahead and pause the video if you have not done so. We should be done with step 1 as soon as we have cloned the repo. And the next thing it's telling us on step 2 is to enter some data into the form and then click the submit button to process it. So let me go ahead and bring up a browser window. Here is our starting application. If we go ahead and enter some data, we'll just go through and fill some out. And submit it. We see that we are only getting out the labels and our email address. We're not getting out any other data that we entered. So we have a little bit of work to do here. So I'm going to move this off the screen for the moment, and we're going to look at step 3, which says open the index.php file and review the code and note the names that are used for the various input controls. So if we go to our index.php, and scroll up to the top, notice we're using a post when we are switching to our display results. So everything's going to be in the request body. We have an input type for text. We have a password that just basically means that it's a text box. We have the phone number of text. Then we are getting into some of our other types of controls that were introduced this week, like our radio buttons. So we have one set of radio buttons. We also have a checkbox control, and we're going to refer back to the names. I'm not going to get too caught up with those at this point. And we also have a select list that we can pick something from the list, and it's not showing us that it's multiples. It's not going to have multiple options that we can process. It can only process one at a time. And then we have a text area down below with our normal submit button. And if I go to the next thing, it says open the display results and review the code. Let's go there. And we basically have some comments here. And we have our email address with an echo statement. And then everything else is pretty much just kind of put in place but not filled in. So we have a lot of code that we need to add. And we might as well go through and do things a little at a time instead of trying to do the whole thing at once, making sure at every step that everything's working. Because sometimes if we do the big bang approach to solving problems, it causes more issues and we have more to debug. Going back to number 5, it says add the code that gets the data from the controls on the first page, then add the code that displays the data. They're also calling out the radio buttons and the checkbox, the text area, etc. individually. So we're going to do everything except for these things. We'll handle these in just a little bit later. I'm going to move this off my screen. And we have, first to start, going up to the top, we have our email, we have our password, and we have our phone number. So we have our password. I'm going to copy that over to our display results. And at the very top, this is going to be $password. And I just want to go ahead and use a filter input. I don't want everything. I'm just going to copy this here and then copy the password and put that in there. So I'm getting that password out. I'm going to do another one here. This is going to be for our phone number. So coming back, we're going to create the variable name phone, and then we're going to be accessing the input post body and getting the phone number parameter out of that array and using that there. So that's going to give us 2 fields. Let's go down and let's add our password. So essentially I need to copy this block, put it within the span for our password and also for our phone number. And then if we come up and copy our password in, followed by our phone number, and again, I'm a terrible typer, that's why I'm doing lots of copy and pasting to make sure I keep everything in sync for those variable names. If I go ahead and try to reprocess this, at least I'm getting some information out for those two fields that we just updated. Let's go back, and at this point, let's get our contact via from our select list as well. So if we go back to our select list, when we have only one selection that's being made and not multiples, it's similar to how we're processing our text boxes. It only gets into needing to deal with an array if we have multiple selections that we're getting back. And in our case, we don't have the multiple specified on our select, and we can just handle it pretty much like we have done with our other parameters. So I'm going to copy this and essentially paste that in, go back, get the name of that select, which is the contact via, go back, change this, and if we go down to contact via, let's copy this down here in our contact via, and then we're also going to copy this down, and that should take care of that. So we can handle our selects essentially the same as our text boxes when we only have one selection. So if I bring my page over and I go back and I have text messages, I come back, we can see text. If I go back and I change it to something else, like email, and submit, I can see email. And then if I go and change it to phone and submit, I should be able to see phone there. So that's all working fine. Switching back to our text, this time we want to deal with our radio buttons, and we want to display a value of unknown if the user doesn't select a radio button. Let's go ahead and switch back to our index.php. Take a look at our radio button. This is going to be heard from, so I'm going to go ahead and copy that. But you'll notice that it has a type of radio, and each member of that group is going to be tied together by the name. So every type that we create for a radio button group is going to have the same name. That's how it gets tied together. We can only have at most one selected from that group, which means that we can use the filter input to get the value out of. But if we want to check to see if it has a value set, because we're not defaulting it to one of the three radio buttons as checked, we need to do an if statement to check to see whether that value that is being returned is null or whether it has some value that we can display. So let's go ahead and let's code that. I've grabbed the heard from, so I'm going to come over here. We have our block here. Let's go ahead and add the variable. So I'm pasting that in, and that's going to be equal. I'm going to grab one of these up here, paste it down, copy this in. And so we're grabbing that heard from the request body and assigning it to our heard from variable. Now that we have our variable, we can do our if comparison check to set it to unknown if it's equal to null. And I'm going to grab this so that I don't have to keep typing it. Now the interesting thing here is we are going to use the equal, and the equal is going to not only check the type, but it's also going to check the value for equality. So we're going to be using that. And then I want to check to see if it's equal to null. And if it is equal to null, then I want to change that value to the unknown. And that's going to set the variable, but we have to still go down and print out our heard from. So I'm going to copy this block here, paste it within the span, and go up and grab my heard from. Again, I want to make sure that I'm not misspelling things. That's why I'm doing so much copying and pasting. And if I save and bring back my page, gone ahead before I brought it back to refresh it because we want to have a fresh page. So I just did a refresh. going through and entering some of the data again. I want to skip the how did you hear about us because I want to check that unknown, because every time we go through some of this stuff, we want to check all conditions, and that is one of the conditions. I'm going to go ahead and click this. Yep, just leave it there, submit it, and we are getting our unknown. Now, if we go back and we select search engine, we're seeing search engine. If we come back, word of mouth, we're getting friend. Then if we pick other, we're getting other. So that is working. I'm going to move this off the screen and let's bring back our text. This time they want us to do the check for the text box to display a value of yes or no, depending on whether the user has selected the checkbox. Okay, so this one we're going to do just a little bit differently because we want to see whether the value is set or not. So we're going to take our checkbox value. So this is the wants update. Bring it over here, and down here, we are going to go ahead and pull this out of the post without doing any filter update or anything like that. So let's just go ahead and do an if statement, and we're going to, within our if block, so let's put in our curlies here, and this is going to be wants update. We're going to set this equal to yes, else. So we have the body of this all set up. We just need that condition, and this is where we're going to do our is set, and this is going to take our $_post array where we have our wants update that we want to pull out of there. So we're going to grab it from the request body, check to see if it's set. If it is set, then we're going to just set our wants updates to yes. If it's not set, then we're going to set it to no. We still need to come down and update this for our display out, and this is going to be our send updates. I'm just going to go ahead, and we don't need to actually do the HTML special characters because this was not something someone entered. We can go ahead and just echo the value out here on this. So let's go ahead and just do the PHP echo. I'm going to get rid of the special characters after I copy it. We set the value, so therefore server-side code set the value. We don't need to have it go through the HTML special characters because we didn't do anything with special characters there. So we have that being set. If we save and go back to our web page, bring it over, I can have it clicked here. You should see yes. If I come back and I unclick it and submit it, I should see no. So that is working. Now, go back to our text, and this is for the fields that allow the user to type, make sure the special characters into the HTML. Does it say anything? For the comment field, make sure to convert the new line chars to BR tags so that the web page can display new line characters correctly. So we will want to be able to maybe do something with a bold in there as well as we're typing through and testing it. So let's go ahead and handle our comments. We go to our index.php, grab the name. So we have comments. We have 4 rows with 50 columns for text entry. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Go back to our display results. And since we haven't put anything here, let's put this here. And we're going to copy in our comments. And again, this is going to essentially be similar to a text box, but we have some more things to do after we get it out of the text box, and we can do it in a couple different ways. So we have our comments here. Once we have the input out of that text area and we have it in a variable, then we want to do our HTML special chars to make sure that we take care of any special characters like the bolding or whatever that might be within that text area before we would go through and handle any of the breaks that are within there. Because anytime that we would go through and hit enter within our text area, we want to take those returns and we want to convert those to HTML line breaks so that we can see the output, and we need to first do that HTML special chars, and I can do it one of two ways. I can make these into individual statements, which sometimes are easier to understand. So if I enter comments equal, this is going to be the HTML special chars, and I'm going to essentially just pass in the comments. So I'm updating that. Then I'm going to do comments, and this is where I want to change it out with the M02L and I'm going to be passing in my comments with the value of false. Okay, so that should take care of it. So that's one way that I can do it in 3 separate statements. And I'm going to leave it here, but I'm going to comment it out after I copy this first statement down. I can also go through and do it in one line. Programmers, we like to make things concise. We would never do more than like 3 things at a time, so this was probably the max that we would do. We would copy our HTML special characters because we want to take the output from that filter input, pass it into our HTML special chars, and now we could assign the comments and do it in 2 statements, or we could go ahead and do the output from the special chars, which has the filter input in. We could pass in our NL2BR and then put our parameter here with false and then execute it this way. So we can either do the 3 or we can do the 1. But we would never do more than 3 statements at one time because it would get too confusing. You should do this the way that it makes the most sense to you and not worry about the fact that you're using too many lines. But I'm just showing you that you can wrap some of these things in one line to consolidate code. Now we have our comments. We just still need to go ahead and echo out our comments. And again, we've done so much processing. We've already handled our special chars. So we just need to go through and do our echo. So I'm just going to copy this block and just change this to our comments. Paste it down here. Now save this. If we go back to our web page, if I bring it over, if I go back, and I want to go ahead and in here put in some HTML tags. Go to the next line. And another line. Now if I submit this, you should see that I have my HTML characters that were entered preserved. I should see that I have multiple lines of text, and at this point we are done with this lab. You can go ahead and post your changes to the GitHub repo. You can always look back to week 2 if you need some additional assistance on getting that posted.